became older and became more aware of what was going on in her surroundings and the things that were going on, I noticed that she wasn't really enjoying what we were doing at the time very much. Even if it was something that she loved, like going to the toy store or going to Barnes & Noble or someplace like that she really loves to go to. And the reason she wasn't enjoying it so much is because she was already thinking about what was next. Where are we going next, Dad? Where are we going next? Are we going to go get ice cream? Or are we going to go to this store or that store? Are we going to go to this place? Or are you going to take me to the park? Or she always wanted to know what's next, what's next, what's next. And so last time we were able to do this and spend this time together, she was kind of getting in that mode. And I just sat her down and I looked at her and I said, Sydney, listen, darling, you need to enjoy where you are before you start worrying about where we're going to be. You need to take a look around you and realize what you have going on right here, right now, instead of just thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next. Have some appreciation. You know, and there's a lot of times in our life where we start realizing that we're missing what's going on in front of us because we're looking at what's next. We miss a lot of good things in life because we're anticipating other things. We're looking for other things. We're waiting for other things. And we have this vision in our lives that the next thing's got to be bigger and better, and so we must look forward to it. Now, all the lessons in life that we get are not feel-good lessons. All the things that we understand and we're taught are not necessarily beautiful and uplifting. Sometimes we have to get the examples of what not to do. Today's mother that we're looking at is one of those moms who didn't make great decisions in life. Her name's Rachel. Find her story in Genesis chapters 30 and 31, or at least this is the part of her story we're going to focus on here today. And if I had to describe Rachel in one word, that word would be selfish. Her decision-making and everything she did revolved around herself. What she wanted, what was best for her, what she thought, how she felt. It was all about her. And so as I began to think about that, and I began to think about the idea of self-centeredness in our society today, because really and truly, we are being taught by our society that being self-centered is an acceptable thing. To be the person who puts herself above everybody and everything else is an acceptable thing. And so we need to understand that you can't really be who you're supposed to be until you really and truly put yourself in the right place in life. You gotta think about what's going on for you. You know, you have to look out for number one. So self-centeredness really has an acceptability in our society today that I really believe that it shouldn't have. And so I want us to look at some of the aspects of self-centeredness and see what it does and how it affects us. And I want us to look at it in light of Rachel and some of the decisions she made in her life. One of the first things that we see is that if you're self-centered, that self-centered people are often very jealous people. In chapter 30, in the first 5 verses, it talks about this when it says, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here's Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she may bear children for me, and that through her I too can build a family." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant with us, and Jacob had a son, and bore him a son. You know, it's interesting, you talk about the idea of self-centeredness and looking at yourself. And she looked at her sister who had children and was building this life, and she was jealous of that. And so she basically acts like a spoiled little child and says, "I'm going to hold my breath until I have a child. You know, if I don't have a kid, I'm going to die." And you see in that passage of scripture a lot of I and me, and I want a child. This child is for me. You know, jealousy tempts us to mistake our will for God's will. As we think about things, and as we think about it in terms of ourselves, and then we look at other people and what they have and what they got, and then we start thinking that we deserve certain things, that we should have certain things, and so we can start mistaking what God's will is, or what our will is for God's will. We begin to think, well, if they have this, then God should want me to have this. And that's basically where Rachel was. She had decided that she had to have it. And it was all about her, and jealousy was just raging in her life. In verse 6, it says, after this happened, that Rachel said, "God has vindicated me." He has vindicated her because she got her way. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because of this, she named him Dan. And it's interesting to see as she goes through life, and as we see her story unfold, that the circumstances of the child coming into this world had a lot to do with what she named her children. Jealousy skews our focus. As we begin to focus on ourselves, as we begin to value things only that benefit us, or carry things that we should probably leave behind and leave in our past. And we start holding on to things, and we start thinking and making comparisons of ourselves and others, and start believing that we should get certain things, and we start mixing up in our minds the difference between what God's will is and what our will is. I had a friend recently that told me that, you know, God had told him to do this certain thing, and he had been thinking on it and praying on it for a long, long time, and God had just told him that this was the right thing to do, and so he did it, and he made this decision, and then after about 6 weeks, totally undid the decision, and it involved other people, and when he went to those other people, he said, "Well, apparently I just heard God wrong." You see, the thing is, he had decided in his own mind what he wanted to do, and he had convinced these other people that it was the right thing to do, but he was saying it was a directive straight from God, and I have to believe that if it was a directive straight from God, and it was God's will, and God had spoken that into his life, that after 6 weeks, after years of prayer, that God wouldn't have just changed his mind that way. exactly the opposite, that we need to ask God what His will is, and then we need to follow it. Another thing that I see here that comes out of selfishness is that you don't see winning as everything but the only thing. Nothing short of being number one. You know, I remember hearing a coach tell me at one point that second place is first loser. So winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. If you go down to verse 8 of Genesis chapter 30, it says, "Then Rachel said, I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named the son Naphtali. Now, remember what I said about she names her children according to what's going on. The name Naphtali literally means in Hebrew a struggle or a fight. Now, can you imagine naming your child that? "Mom, how did you decide how to name me?" "Well, I had a big fight with your aunt, and you were the prize, and I won, so I named you that, so every time I said your name, I would be reminded that I am the winner." It has nothing to do with your child. It has everything to do with her. She had to win, even if it involved doing these things that had no real consequence in her mind, but had real effect on her children, her family, and other people around her. The attitude of win at all costs and you can't be anything but number one, it skews what defines what winning really is. Because just because you get your way doesn't mean you won. In fact, sometimes when you get your way, it's exactly the opposite. You took a big L because your way really wasn't the right way or what God's way was or the best way. But we think, oh, if I get my way, I'm a winner. And so it skews the definition of what winning really is. And then most importantly, it leads us to not recognize who and what matters in life. This win at all costs because I've got to be the winner. You're willing to stomp and step on everybody that's in your way. You don't care what you do. It's like I've heard the old saying that you got to be careful about how you treat people on the way up, because when you're on the way down, you're going to come across them all again. And when you don't care about other people because you only care about yourself, and you have this attitude of winning has to be everything. Now, I have some different strategies in parenting that I didn't really learn from any book or anybody else. They're just kind of things that I think are things that my daughter needs to learn. And one of those is I will destroy my daughter in Candyland. I will take her out. I am not afraid to give her a severe beatdown when we play Candyland. And the reason is I don't want her to think that she has to win every time, and if she doesn't win every time, it's a meltdown. It's a falling apart. I can't take it if I'm not number one. I can't take it if I don't win. She has to realize that not every game is going to be her game. Not every time that something happens is she going to be the one that receives the benefit from it. She's not going to be number one all her life. There are going to be times when she takes the loss. And anybody who's been in any situation where they keep score and there's winners and there's losers, they will tell you that most of the time they've learned much more through the losses than through the wins. And sometimes you have to experience loss to understand how great the win is. And then if is that people who are really, really selfish are rarely, if ever, satisfied. Chapter 30, verse 15. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? This is Leah talking to Rachel. Now will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. She's bartering out mandrakes and her son and sexual favors, and all these things are going on, and it's because she has to get what she wants. Because when you get to that winning at all costs and you win, then sooner or later you're not satisfied with winning anymore. There's a lot of speculation for baseball fans about one of the greatest players to play of all time, but his legacy is tainted because of alleged decisions that he made. If you follow baseball, you know that there was a real bad, what they call the steroid era in baseball, where all these players were getting huge and crushing all these monumental home runs, and all these things were happening. Well, there became this home run race for breaking Roger Maris's record between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. But Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa aren't the players that I'm talking about right now, because it was said that as that race was going on, and all the media and all the things that went on, that Barry Bonds was watching it happen. And so even though I believe he's one of the greatest players to ever play, he can do everything. He's one of those five-tool guys, they call him. He could run, he could throw, he could hit, play defense, all the things that he was supposed to do, and do them at an elite level. But yet when he saw the attention that those guys were getting, the rumors, and they've never been proven, were that he began to take steroids himself with the goal of breaking their record, so all that glory would go to him. You see, he wasn't satisfied with being known as one of the greatest players to ever play the game. He was only going to be satisfied when he was known as the greatest player to play the game. And when he was only going to be satisfied when people looked at him and said, you are the king. You are the one. Well, one of the problems with that is it's a totally subjective thing anyway. When you ask people, who's the greatest player of all time, you ask 100 people, you might get 60 to 100 different answers. It's the same if you ask who's the greatest band of all time, or who's the greatest singer of all time, who's the greatest president of all time. All these things, you're going to get different answers from everybody. But people who are selfish are rarely satisfied. No matter what they get, they only require more. They only have to have better. It only has to, they can't have the middle of the road. They've got to have the top of the line. It can only be the best. Only the best. And the problem with that is that you begin to only be someone who takes. You take and take and take. And you don't care who you hurt. Because the goal is the thing, and it doesn't matter what happens to somebody along the way. You're just willing to squash somebody in any way, shape, form, or fashion. One of the first times I remember hearing about it was many, many years ago. The craze of finding the it toy for Christmas for your kids. The first one I remember, and some of you may remember it, was Tickle Me Elmo. And I remember watching the news. I was a younger guy at the time, and I remember watching watching the news and watching these people literally hitting and punching each other, and pushing each other down, stepping over people to get this toy. Because their kid was going to have the greatest Christmas ever. Even though mom or dad committed a felony while getting it. They didn't care. They didn't care that somebody else's kid wasn't going to get the Tickle Me Elmo. Their kid was going to get it. They didn't care what happened to anybody else. They only cared that they won. And something tells me a lot of those parents didn't even care if their kid cared that they got it. My guess is there were a bunch of kids at Christmas that had no idea that Tickle Me Elmo even existed until they opened it up. And that there were probably some kids that weren't even old enough to understand what was going on. But mom or dad won. They're never satisfied. They don't care who they hurt. And another thing is that people who are selfish often lie to protect themselves. If you go to Genesis 31, verses 34 and 35, it says this. It says, now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period. So he searched, but could not find the household gods. I'm somewhat speechless after reading this. I don't, to even fathom what was going through this girl's mind at this point is kind of unbelievable. She had done a terrible thing and then covered it up with a lie. And people who are selfish are willing to lie and say anything to get what they want. Or to get themselves out of something that won't get them what they want. I've heard people describe these as little white lies. You know, as far as I know from Scripture, there's no degree on any sin. It's a sin. There might be different degrees to different crimes and law, but according to God, there is sin and obedience. There's no such thing as a little white lie. A lie is a lie is a lie. Yet, even deeper than that, they don't care who they lie to or what they lie about. I have a friend that I grew up with, and he was rather harmless as far as what he did, but the fact of the matter is that I had another friend that said, you know how you tell if this guy's lying? I don't know how. With his lips removed. Because he had to make people think he was something that he was not, and he wanted to build himself up in other people's minds. So he would tell people these unbelievable stories that were really just way far out there, some of them. But he didn't care who he told them to. And sometimes I believe that maybe he told them so much and so often that he began to actually believe some of the things that he was saying. But they don't care. If you're selfish, you don't care who you lie to, as long as it benefits you. You don't care who you mislead, as long as there's some benefit into it for you. And they don't care what the consequences for you might be after the fact. As long as they get out of it, they're fine. But you might have some consequences, but that's not really their problem. The problem is that self-centeredness is the antithesis of everything Christ called us to be. So what does Christ call us to be? Well, Lloyd read a passage this attitude that Rachel had? What is the opposite of what our society says? You do what you've got to do to take care of yourself and look out for number one. Well, what does Paul say that Jesus showed us and represented to us there in Philippians chapter 2 and verses 3 through 5? Well, this first idea is that we don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. We don't do anything because it only benefits us. We don't do anything just to make ourselves look better. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Don't be selfish. I mean, it's pretty clear. Don't be selfish. So Paul's making this very clear to the church in Philippi because he's telling them, if you read the whole book of Philippians or the whole letter to the church in Philippi, you see that they're doing really good. And a lot of what Paul's doing is just encouraging them and reiterating things and saying, keep moving, keep going forward, keep taking it a step forward. Do nothing of selfish ambition or vain conceit, and value others above yourself. So see, the world tells us to put yourself at the top, and Jesus says really what you need to do is put yourself at the bottom. And not that you don't look at yourself and see yourself with value, but the fact is that you don't live your life for you. You don't live your life only to please yourself. You don't live your life only to get what you want. You live your life to serve God, and the way that you serve God is to look at others and serve others and value them. It's amazing, as society keeps telling us to value yourself over everybody else, we see the trend in society is that people see themselves with less and less value. Labels get put on. People get shunned. We talk about the divide that exists in our country between the races. All these things are because people value themselves over anybody or anything else. And what God says is that you value others more than yourself. That no matter where somebody is in life or what they're going through or in how they are in their lives, you make sure that they know that they are important to you because they are important to God. Begin to value others more than yourself. And then he takes that a step further and says, here's what you need to do. You need to look out for the interest of other people. Not only do you value them, you look out for them and their interests. What is good for them? As a parent, there's a lot of things that I do that I don't really want to do. But I know that my daughter will benefit from those things. I have no desire to do some of these things. They're not anything that I feel like is going to benefit me in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But I do them because I know that there's going to be benefit for her. There's a lot of things that people do in their lives that they get absolutely nothing out of. And guess what? They feel awesome about that. Because they get it. They understand. They know that it's not about what you receive from something. It's about understanding what God has called for us to do, and that's to serve others. Look out to the interest of others. Not too terribly long ago, which when I say this, you're going to say, this could be like probably about 1,000 different instances in the last few months. When I tell you where I was when this happened, I was in the drive-thru on this particular day, I pulled up, and you know how now they have the people taking orders out in the parking lot or in the line, so you don't have to go up. Well, this was one of those times when it wasn't real busy, so you actually had to pull up to the speaker and take the order the old-fashioned way in the drive-through line. And so I made my order and I pulled around, and there was one other car in front of me, and I wish now that I had paid more attention to that car. Because when the car drove off and I drove up, the girl handed me my food and said, "Here you go." And I said, "Wait a minute, I didn't pay anybody yet." And she said, "The person in front of you paid for you." Now that person got absolutely nothing out of that. At least nothing